Hogan had called me up and asked me if I knew Jim Brunzell. And I said, just from the magazines and stuff, I never had met Jumpin' Jim. And I knew he was a good tag team wrestler because of Greg Gagne working in the AWA. And Terry had just come from the AWA. Vince kind of cherry plucked everybody from every territory that drew money. And so it was my turn to get plucked. I'm on top. And so I agreed to come up. Jim and I were promised the tag team titles, which is a whole nother story.
So for the WWF, obviously the WrestleMania era, so Hogan is kind of responsible for you and Brunzell forming the Killer Bees?
Yes, actually, Vince wanted to create like a real meaningful tag team division, which he did. He brought in some
Oh,
great
yeah.
teams, if you remember, JP. And so Terry suggested to him that because I was going to come up and work for the Intercontinental title, which Tito Santana wound up in that spot. Tito's a wonderful guy too. Uh, Merced wound up in that spot, and I just took Terry's advice, met Jim in Brantford, Ontario, Canada, and we didn't have a name at that time. We were just Blair and Brunzell, and again, Vince wanted to create a very meaningful tag team division, and so we met in Brantford, and George Scott came up to us and he said, "Hey guys, I'm just getting to know Jimmy." Great conversation. A lot of guys in the locker room. Lanny Poffo just happened to be sitting right next to where Jimmy and I were talking, and George had come up and said, "Hey, you guys need to think of a catchy name. Vince wants a catchy name before you go on, and you're on in less than an hour." So George walked away, and wow, we're just sitting there, catchy name, and a few names came up, and I started the bees, Blair, Brunzell, and I had remembered the Killer Bees defense on the Miami Dolphins football team. I think I was in junior high school. It was like 1972, and the Bonacani and I think it was Baumgarten. Anyway, they had the linebackers all. Their last names began with a B, and they were the Killer Bees. So I said, "How about the Killer Bees?" Jimmy said, "The Killer Bees. I like that. I like that. That's great." And George hadn't even left the room, and George the Animal Steel was there. So he said, "George is still there," and uh, I we kind of called him over. We did call him over, and he came back. And I said to George, "How about the Killer Bees?" And he got a big smile on his face. He goes, "I like it. Let me see what Vince thinks." So he left right away, and he came back maybe 10 minutes later, and he says, "Hey, that's it. You guys are the Killer Bees." So the bees were born in Brantford, Ontario, and this couldn't happen in a million years. But when this is taking place and we're the Killer Bees, Lanny Poffo was reaching in this big bag that he had was actually a hockey bag. So that's how big it was. You can carry a hockey
Yeah.
stick, all that stuff in there, your pads. So he reaches in and he's got so many tights in there, and he pulls out these black and yellow tights, striped tights. So they were the same tights that we wore, and he happened to have two pairs of them. And so Lanny gave us the tights right there. I was just kind of unbelievable how everything meshed together. And God, we had 4 years of a wonderful time.
What did you think about Jim Brunzell though? Because obviously, you know of him, but now you got a team with him. Like, what was the chemistry like, and did you guys get along, away from the ring as much as you did inside the ring? Because you guys had great chemistry in the ring.
Yeah, well, JP, we got along so well that once in a while, when we even felt like there might be maybe it was time to ride with somebody else, we would do that. And we'd share a room. Back then it was always about not how much you made, about how much you saved. We were filming in Canada, and a guy named Billy Red Lyons, um, who I really didn't know was a wrestler. I thought he was an announcer. I got to be friends with him. He was just such a good announcer. And I hadn't done enough homework, and turns out Billy Red Lyons was a huge star in his day. And he told me that he told Jim and I that him and his brother, I believe it was, were a heel tag team, and they used to put masks on and switch, and it would get so much heat. And he said, the way the way that you guys work, you're such baby faces that I think you could do this and get away with it as baby faces if the heel gets enough heat on you. So, we liked it and we tried it, and sure enough, I mean, people bought that. And then Lord Lord Blears was doing commentating, and so he called it Mass Confusion, and so Mass Confusion caught on, and of course, back then, Gino Morella, he was great, Gorilla Monsoon, him and him and Vince and Lord Blears were primary commentators for the first part of the Killer Bees run, and for the first year, they were our main commentators, and they were just phenomenal. And Lord Blears really got the Mass Confusion thing over. It was good.
So cool, so different. I just remember, as a kid being like, "Oh my god, what's going on here?" You know what I mean? It was great. It was such a cool, different gimmick to kind of pull off.
Yeah, it was totally different. It was very, and that's why we were going to turn heel, and and if Jimmy was sitting next to me, he'd tell you exactly what I'm. Jimmy and I are still very close, and we do a lot of events every single year together, signings and things like that. So Jimmy and Vince, I didn't know this until maybe 4 years ago, that Jimmy had sued Greg Gagne and Vince because they created action figures. Vince did, and Greg signed the contract, signed Jimmy's name, handed it back to Vince. Well, anyway, Jimmy wound up suing Vince and Greg together, and he won the lawsuit. So, he had heat kind of going in. I mean, I guess Vince realized that, it was his fault, or just as much his fault as Greg's fault. And, but, Jimmy would do things like, Vince came and he was really excited about the Killer Bee t-shirts that they just came out. And you got to stare at them for a little bit before, and then they kind of maybe grow on you a little bit. And, but I know better than, if somebody's excited, I'm not going to rain on their parade and say, "Hey, that looks terrible." But Jimmy's such a straight shooter. He goes, "Vince is excited. What do you think about these t-shirts?" I go, "Look," and I go, "Wow, Vince, those are really nice. I like those." Jimmy goes, "I don't. Those are terrible." And I'm going, "Jimmy," it's just like, you can't hold him back. And, there were other things where, as Jimmy and Vince were like oil and water. So I kind of got the brunt end of that, the tag team situation, because we were promised the belts 3 times on 3 different occasions. And, from Vince himself and George Scott. And, they'd say, "Oh, the money's in the chase, the money's in the chase." But you've got to, I finally said, "Vince, you promised us a belt 3 times. It's never happened." There was Strike Force coming in, we had the Rougeos, the Strike Force. We had so many tag teams coming in, that we kind of got mixed up then in the shuffle. And so I wound up giving my notice in Salisbury, Maryland, not too long before WrestleMania 5. We were in WrestleMania 2, WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 4, and not too long before WrestleMania 5, I just said, I'd rather. We had wrestled 67 days straight. Valentine and Hammer were, I mean, golly, they were about to get divorces from their wives. Jimmy was arguing. He was missing his kids, functions. And people don't realize how grueling that is to be. We were in 67 different cities without a day off in 4 different countries. And when I say we had the day off to fly to the country, but we'd wrestle immediately. So you'd get out.
Not much of a day off, yeah.
Yeah, it was your day was in an airplane and in a car or a train or a bus getting to your shots. So we went 67 days. And oftentimes we'd wrestle 2 times in a day, 2 different venues. Television was a lot of times 2 different shots. So 67 days without a day off, and then being in 5 different countries. It just, it was too much. Too much.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please help me out and like this video, then click the subscribe and get notifications buttons so you don't miss any of my latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Facebook at the Hannibal TV for more live streams and videos. And while you're at it, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the Hannibal TV.